Tehran mistakenly believed it held every tactical advantage in the Strait of Hormuz, while Operation Epic Fury has systematically dismantled the regime's military infrastructure on the mainland. IRGC fast attack boats within that strategic choke point still provided Iran with critical leverage. That era is over. The United States has just deployed a strategic asset to Iran that will fundamentally rewrite the entire conflict overnight, and it is steaming directly toward the Strait of Hormuz. This is Tehran's ultimate nightmare scenario. It is the one contingency the regime never truly anticipated. Conventional US ground troops preparing for potential entry into Iran. Make sure you are subscribed to Titan Mechanics and hit that bell icon so you never miss a critical military intel update. Now back to the deployment. On March 14th, multiple major outlets, including the BBC, confirmed that Washington was dispatching additional warships toward Iran. Normally, this alone would be major headlines. Increased naval presence typically correlates to accelerated airstrikes on Iranian territory, a pattern established by American carrier deployments in recent weeks. However, this movement is radically different. The primary task force sailing toward Iran is spearheaded by the USS Tripoli. This is not just another warship, it is an amphibious assault ship, and it is leading an elite U.S. Marine Expeditionary Unit directly into the Middle East theater. This deployment is massive. Amphibious assault ships and expeditionary units represent the clearest signal to date that the Pentagon is gearing up to potentially put boots on the ground. We will dissect exactly why that is and isn't the case later in this analysis. Regarding the specific force being deployed, the War Zone, TWZ, provides critical operational details. Sources state this specific task force set sail only after U.S. Central Command received direct authorization from U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. The outlet confirms that what is currently en route to Iran is an amphibious ready group, ARG, with an attached Marine Expeditionary Unit, MEU. An amphibious ready group typically consists of an assault ship, 2 transport docks, and a crucial support vessel. Collectively, they carry an embarked Marine Expeditionary Unit comprised of at least 2,200 combat-ready Marines, though it is highly probable they are holding more. The New York Times estimates approximately 2,500 Marines are currently en route to the Middle East, specifically targeting Iran, and identifies the specific unit, the historic 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit. Currently, the USS Tripoli ARG is transiting to the Middle East from its standard forward deployed base in Japan. Evidence suggests the Marines and sailors aboard these vessels have been intensely preparing for something. On March 13th, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command shared images of sailors aboard the USS Tripoli conducting a live fire exercise only the day prior. While official channels dismissed this as routine training, and it may well have been, the timing is suspiciously uncoincidental. The exercise occurred on March 12th. 48 hours later, the news broke that the USS Tripoli was officially in transit toward Iran. Here is where the strategic situation becomes devastating for the Iranian regime. This specific ARG and expeditionary unit might only be the first wave of several. In a detailed post on X, analyst Ian Ellis revealed the US maintains other ready ARGs and task forces stationed throughout the Pacific region that could receive immediate deployment orders for Iran. Among these assets are Task Force Ashland, currently positioned in Thailand, and the USS Arlington, another massive amphibious warship that was reported on March 1st as conducting repeated high-intensity loading operations out of Norfolk while surrounded by armed security boats. This raises a critical question. Was that specific training a rehearsal for deployment to Iran? While not confirmed, these exact loading exercises simulate the volatile conditions and threats the ship would confront in the Strait of Hormuz. Keep that vital waterway in mind. We will return to its strategic importance shortly. Beyond the task forces already mentioned, Ellis adds that 3 additional ARGs, the Iwo Jima, Boxer, and Kearsarge, are all in strategic positions to join the USS Tripoli's task force should Washington issue the recall. Consequently, what we might be witnessing is the beginning of a truly massive conventional Marine deployment. Even if it is not a full-scale surge, the USS Tripoli and its support ships alone send an undeniable message to Tehran. The entire US combat posture in the Iran conflict has fundamentally shifted. However, that strategic shift will not be instantaneous. An open-source intelligence update shared by analyst MT Anderson on X notes that the USS Tripoli is currently moving at incredibly high speed toward the Middle East. This movement is trackable via satellite imagery, which shows a ship wake large enough to indicate indicate the vessel is going hell for leather to reach the theater. Yet, even at maximum velocity, the warship grouping must still transit to the Middle East from its station in White Beach, Okinawa. The task force was spotted approaching the Bashi Channel, situated between Taiwan and the Philippines, on March 12th, and it may require another week or two before it arrives on station in the Middle East. But that timeline does not change the core reality. The United States is sending Marines and heavy amphibious warships into the Middle East. This is Iran's ultimate nightmare, specifically regarding the asymmetric leverage Iran holds over the global economy in the Strait of Hormuz. But before we dissect that dynamic, we must analyze exactly what a Marine Expeditionary Unit brings to the fight, as that composition offers critical hints about what Washington may be considering with this latest deployment scenario. We need your help to push this analysis. If you're finding this intel valuable, drop a like right now and share this video with your squad. Now back to the MEU capability. These specific units are among the most versatile rapid response forces the US military possesses, with the New York Times noting they are frequently referred to as America's 911 force. In military terms, these are the heavy hitters you call when an urgent, complex problem requires an immediate solution. Marine Expeditionary Units have successfully executed everything from counter-piracy operations to being the lead element laying boots on the ground during major conventional operations, as they did during the initial invasion of Afghanistan in 2001. These are completely self-sustained, rapid response strike forces structured to project air, ground, and logistic combat elements, optimized into 4 distinct groupings. First is the command element, which serves as the unit headquarters and provides operational support to all deployed forces. The ground combat element, GCE, serves as the MEU's heaviest hitter in terms of sheer kinetic combat force. That element typically contains a full Marine infantry battalion, reinforced with artillery support, reconnaissance assets, combat engineers, and the amphibious assault vehicles necessary to execute forced landings on hostile territory. Integrating the aviation combat element, ACE, injects substantial air power into the mix. A medium helicopter squadron featuring various models of transport, utility, and attack choppers is core to this element. Crucially, a Marine Expeditionary Unit may also bring AV-8B Harrier or F-35 Lightning II fighter jets and dedicated attack helicopters into the theater, alongside a robust air defense team and other aerial assets to support the grunts on the ground. Finally, there is the logistics combat element. Transportation, supplies, ammunition, equipment, maintenance, and medical support are all provided by this critical supporting component. Consequently, this is not Washington sending a handful of soldiers for show. This is an elite Marine strike unit operating as part of a larger amphibious assault team that signifies a total strategic posture shift for the United States. The devastating impact of that shift will be felt most acutely in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has been actively wreaking havoc in that strategic passage. The tactical reason is clear. Even with its conventional military infrastructure utterly devastated on the mainland by Operation Epic Fury, Tehran has managed to maintain an aggressive focus on the Strait of Hormuz. Fast attack boats operated by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, in coordination with suicide drones launched from Iran itself, have been relentlessly targeting the commercial vessels that aggregate to highlight the Strait of Hormuz as perhaps the world's most critical maritime choke point. This is a narrow passage of water just 31 miles wide at its absolute tightest points, making it incredibly simple for IRGC fast boats to patrol and ambush shipping. Yet it is the key to the passage of roughly 20 million barrels of oil every single day as of 2025 data. Iran's hostile actions in that strait, which have almost completely strangled the waterway, barring a handful of ships daring to make the hazardous crossing, ought to threaten the stability of the entire global economy. This assessment is validated by CBS News, which reported on March 15th that Tehran is successfully turning the strait into a weaponized choke point by targeting commercial shipping, thus inflating global oil prices substantially. Right now, the outlet confirms one of the Pentagon's highest priorities is to forcibly wrest control of the Strait of Hormuz from the hands of the IRGC, which has already attacked at least 16 major commercial vessels as of March 12th, killing 8 civilian mariners and causing another to go missing in the process. According to analysis by TWZ, only 77 commercial ships dared to transit the strait during the first 2 weeks of March. For critical context, the exact same period in 2025 saw 1,229 successful passages passages through the Strait of Hormuz. Consequently, we are currently seeing only about a 16th of the standard maritime traffic that should be moving through the strait actually getting through right now. This strangled traffic represents Iran's remaining strategic leverage. And these attacks are guaranteed to continue for as long as Iran and the IRGC are permitted to hold tactical sway in the Strait of Hormuz. The arrival of an elite marine expeditionary force to that strait is a massive posture shift that demonstrates how the US-Iran war is moving into an aggressive new phase, after the US has systematically destroyed the country's conventional military infrastructure via precision air power. The arrival of this specific combat unit changes every tactical calculation. So the posture shift, what the imminent arrival of the USS Tripoli ARG and up to 2,500 elite Marines achieves, is providing military commanders stationed in the region with the immediate option to execute a wide variety of kinetic security missions in the Strait of Hormuz. These specific missions might include high-risk VBSS, visit, board, on search and seizure operations, the emergency evacuation of passengers from stricken commercial ships, or if Washington does decide to finally put boots on the ground, limited offensive operations against the port facilities and internal launch locations from which Iran is dispatching its fast attack boats into the strait. It is also highly interesting to note that the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit that is steaming toward the Middle East as we speak is a core component of America's Indo-Pacific force posture. Washington is actively reallocating critical strategic assets, albeit likely only for the short term, which sends an unambiguous message to Tehran and the world that it is willing to temporarily weaken its posture in the Indo-Pacific region in order to critically strengthen its posture against Iran. In other words, the United States is not allowing Iran's hostile actions in the Strait of Hormuz to cause it to back down or de-escalate. It is sending even more advanced firepower into the Middle East. This heavy deployment comes approximately 2 weeks after the US initially launched Operation Epic Fury, and as Gulf News points out, it could also provide the Pentagon with the capability to launch amphibious raids or seizures of the strategic islands situated in and around the Persian Gulf that the IRGC relies heavily upon for its Strait of Hormuz A2/AD anti-access/area denial strategy. Consequently, what we may see the 31st MEU execute is targeted strikes against anti-ship missile batteries and drone launch sites on these specific islands, along with neutralizing whatever remains of Iran's naval mine-laying capabilities in the wake of US. Washington Central Command reporting that American forces have already destroyed 16 of Iran's dedicated mine-laying vessels. As analyzed, a Marine Expeditionary Unit heading to the Middle East provides Washington with immediate, scalable combat options, and according to Defense Secretary Hegseth, there is a definitive plan in place, even if the Pentagon is not revealing to the public specifically what that operational plan might entail. During a tense March 13th press conference, Hegseth stated, "The only thing prohibiting transit in Hormuz right now is Iran shooting at shipping. It is open for transit should Iran not do that." An obvious statement of fact, perhaps, but this statement also provides a clear hint about what is happening in the mind of the US Secretary of Defense. Hegseth claims that American forces are already actively dealing with Iran's ongoing attacks on commercial shipping, with TWZ adding that he explicitly stated that the US is not going to allow the Strait of Hormuz to remain indefinitely contested. So Washington has some kind of definitive operational plan to resolve the crisis. The question now is simple. What is that plan? Boots on the ground seems to be an increasing operational likelihood, but simply having the incredible versatility and variety of strike options that we have already analyzed could be exactly what Hegseth has in mind. A Marine Expeditionary Unit can be utilized to directly support America's ongoing aerial campaign against Iran, for instance. TWZ confirms that these specific MEU units can provide substantial additional aircraft up to and including the advanced F-35 Lightning II to execute high-end strike missions. And whether those missions would be conducted against targets on the Iranian mainland or executed at sea remains the key tactical question. In the latter scenario, the Pentagon may be planning on having advanced fighter jets take to the skies directly over the Strait of Hormuz in a persistent CAP, combat air patrol, where they could immediately fire upon IRGC fast boats, missile batteries, and drones. The outlet notes that the USS Tripoli, in particular, was constructed with this exact mission purpose in mind, and that it can even be optimized as a dedicated F-35 Lightning carrier if necessary. Perhaps that is the core operational plan. The rapid arrival of the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit in the Middle East could be a way for the Pentagon to insert a carrier-like strike force into the narrow confines of the Strait of Hormuz, without diverting the focus or or risking the supercarriers it already has operating in the region. Add the Marines themselves conducting high-risk crisis missions, such as search and rescue or VBSS for commercial vessels that Iran strikes, and you have what amounts to a robust combat escort being provided to the merchant ships attempting to transit the strait. It is not a huge traditional naval escort, granted, but it is one that allows for devastating rapid responses to asymmetric threats posed within the Strait of Hormuz. Another distinct possibility is that the United States may utilize its Marines and advanced amphibious attack craft to directly attack and occupy strategic islands in and around the Persian Gulf. We witnessed a kinetic precursor to something like this with the bombing of what the Wall Street Journal identifies as Iran's most strategic economic asset, Karg Island. As the primary launching point for fully 90% of Iran's vital oil exports, that island was hit with what effectively amounts to a devastating warning shot. American airstrikes obliterated key loading infrastructure but intentionally left most of Iran's core oil production assets untouched. U.S. on. President Donald Trump has explicitly stated that the United States would reconsider its current decision to leave Iran's oil assets alone if Tehran refuses to immediately reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Could the elite Marines and heavy amphibious ships heading to the Middle East serve as a physical reinforcement of that strategic threat? It is highly probable. It is also analytically notable that Iran owns and occupies over 30 strategic islands in the Persian Gulf region, only some of which are open to visitors and many of which are heavily militarized IRGC outposts. We analyzed earlier that amphibious landings on these specific islands may permit American forces to seize control of patches of strategic land that are likely serving as the primary launch points for Iran's fast boats and drones. Thus, with that physical control would come the systematic whittling away of the entire asymmetric leverage that Tehran holds via the Strait of Hormuz. Consequently, the US may be actively setting up for a strategic future where it directly oversees and secures the Strait of Hormuz by taking over key Iranian islands right from under the nose of the struggling Iranian regime. All the while, the US would continue to launch devastating airstrikes against military targets on the Iranian mainland and hold the ever-present existential threat of future attacks against Karg Island over the collective head of the Iranian regime. Finally, there is the explosive possibility that President Trump stated the US was nowhere near approaching at the beginning of March, physically putting conventional American boots on the ground within Iran. 1. We analyzed earlier that a Marine Expeditionary Unit, specifically the 15th Unit, was historically the very first conventional U.S. ground force that went in on the ground during the initial invasion of Afghanistan back in 2001. That is a historical fact that Tehran simply cannot afford to ignore now that a remarkably similar heavy unit is heading in Iran's direction. It means history has demonstrated that Marine Expeditionary Units frequently serve as the initial spears for much larger conventional ground assaults. According to reporting by Bloomberg, Trump is still actively wrestling with the concept of placing conventional boots on the ground, as it would mean placing US troops directly in the IRGC's firing line. Was an operational decision that has the distinct potential to send negative shockwaves through his base of support back home. Still, given Tehran's intransigence, it is an increasing operational possibility, and if the United States does in fact send soldiers into Iran, there are a few obvious strategic targets it would aim for. Seizing Karg Island, along with occupying some other strategic IRGC islands, is the most tactically obvious of these objectives for the exact reasons that we analyzed earlier. Bloomberg adds a more critical objective. Washington may want to seize physical control over the large amounts of enriched uranium that are known to be in Iran's possession. This is exactly the high-value type of hardened target that the US and Israel struck during Operation Midnight Hammer back in June, and there is robust evidence that B-2 Spirit bombers launched GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators at more of Iran's deep underground facilities during the opening phase of Operation Epic Fury. However, to prevent Tehran from utilizing these types of deeply buried facilities altogether, conventional troops would be strictly necessary on the ground to take full physical control, thus permanently preventing a dreaded dirty bomb or breakout scenario. But there is another possibility, as Bloomberg detailed analysis explains. But third mission would be partnering with the Central Intelligence Agency and Israel's Mossad to send small elite teams into Iran to connect with the domestic political opposition to form a true armed resistance movement, the outlet notes. And as tactically aggressive as this concept sounds, it is also one that seems to very closely align with how Washington envisions eventual regime change happening in Tehran. In the immediate wake of the initial devastating airstrikes against Iran's regime on February 28th, Trump even declared directly to Iran's populace, "When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take," the New York Times reports. And though Trump has backtracked slightly on those comments since, noting that it is objectively a pretty big ask for the regular Iranian people to rise up unarmed when there are fanatical members of the IRGC in the streets gunning down anyone who protests the Iranian regime, it still seems analytically clear that Washington envisions a future where the US serves in a primary supporting role for a domestic anti-regime movement within Iran. Could that supporting role be the eventual mission that the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit is destined to play? There are obviously a massive amount of operational risks involved with this potential approach. Mossad and the CIA would need to already possess high-level contacts on the ground within Iran, along with enough actionable confidence in these contacts to know that they will actually work to form an anti-regime army that can operate effectively with help from the US military. But in this dynamic scenario, the United States may utilize the heavy capabilities of the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit to seize and secure key military and economic nodes, such as Karg Island, while simultaneously providing critical training and a secured through line of advanced weapons to a coordinated domestic resistance movement focused specifically on toppling the Iranian regime on the mainland. Plenty of Iran's conventional military firepower has already been systematically ruined by American air power. With professional organization, substantial funding, and advanced weapons, a domestic resistance movement would be in the absolute best strategic position it has been in since the 1979 Iranian Revolution to make a decisive move against the mullahs. Elite Marines and Special Forces operatives from the United States could easily tip the scales in favor of those anti-regime revolutionaries. It may sound like an extreme scenario to some, but if it actually comes to pass, Iran's remaining leverage in the Strait of Hormuz would instantly disappear, and the country's hated regime would not be far behind. And watching all of this unfold from the strategic sidelines with increasing alarm is Russian President Vladimir Putin. None of this chaos was supposed to happen according to Putin's calculations. He had been successfully using Iran as a strategic proxy to build Russia's influence in the Middle East while distracting Washington. But it is happening, and the imminent collapse of Iran's regime would have truly massive ramifications for the Russian president and his war in Ukraine. Find out exactly what those geopolitical ramifications are by watching our detailed video on Russia's collapse in the Middle East. Sound off in the comments below. Do you think the Marines are going in? Smash that like button, subscribe to Titan Mechanics, and share this intelligence with your squad. We'll see you on the next one.